Welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 492. I am your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you so much for joining us. Wow, we're already fast into the new year. It seems, strangely for me, it's like, okay, we just shot out the cannon from 2024. We're in 2025, and now it feels like I'm skipping because the weeks are chunking off. It's already the 10th. We're already talking about transitions and changes, which is not a surprise. We knew these things were going to be happening. We talked about new budgets and the new year and new perspectives and all of that. Dramatically and sadly, there are always events that create influences on what we do as an industry. The tragedy that's happening in Southern California right now, as it unfolds live, it's not gone. It's not just seeing it on the screen. This is real. It's hard to fathom the idea that thousands of homes are gone, because that multiplies by the families that live there, businesses, everything, devastation. The impact on that market, I reflect back on times historically when I was more directly on properties in the area. But in Texas, when the hurricane hit, when Katrina hit Louisiana and hit New Orleans, and the exodus of, they called it a population shift, because of the devastation in its scope and size, shifted whole communities. Now, maybe some of it temporarily as they eventually made their way back to their origin, but there was a dramatic shift of population that occurred. I think back to when I was doing speaking engagements with HSMAI for the Rocket program, the RCT, Revenue Optimization, Convergence, and what have you. And we're in different cities and so forth. And we had the pleasure, the distinct pleasure, to have Veronica with us, and Chris from Smith Travels, Star Reports. And they were showing from their data, they showed the accumulation of data, the time sequences of occupancies and lack of inventory, the loss of the product, the hotels and the accommodations and so forth, in a map of the United States in color code. It was amazing. You saw it begin to change as the storm was approaching, where you saw people were trying to get out of its way, from occupancies and growing. And then you just saw it ripple. And then you saw the numbers not come back because, of course, inventory was lost. And that's what's happening now. That's what's happening with Southern California. The shift of it, the perspective of population from it. We have some small semblances of that here in Florida when the hurricane hits. Obviously, if you were to reenact the data similar to what I just described Star had done for a presentation, you would see the involvement of inventory and the depletion of inventory and a wave of it, but not to the massive life-altering displacement that I think Southern California is going to be having. Now, it isn't to our topic today that I bring this up. It's to the reality of the time that the show is running as to what is happening in our world, in the domestic United States. And I know we're global at 209 countries, and I know that we're live broadcasting in several of them, that people are live and watching us in doing so. But the impact of natural disaster, we've done shows about it. We've had conversations with guests about it. We've talked about how to handle the predication of it, how to handle the duration of it, and how to handle the recovery of it, both from being affected by it and being ones that can be supportive in replacing what was lost by other inventory, all of that. We've had all those discussions. But it just goes to the temporalness of what our best laid plans are. We're sitting on brand new, as we say, shiny budgets for 2025. We have brand new projections and forecasts for 2025 and so forth. But the topic today is a little bit on the other side of the pendulum swing. It is relevant because things happen and you need to be prepared for them. And you need to understand better what your data is telling you to know how to react to what the actual impact of those events are on you. But to take it from the tragedy side of it and go to more of the systematic way we operate. Like I said, it's pendulum shift. The topic for today is waiting for it to break. Why we need to embrace predictive analytics. Now, when I first started up with this topic, I was talking to my the Hospitality Marketing Club memberships and so forth as to topic variations I was looking for and stuff. It was brought to my attention that a little less than 2 months ago, I was talking about predictive analytics and the usage of predictive analytics as a means and modality of depleting these dips and curves that happen from waiting for the productive success of campaigns to diminish to the point of being recognized and acknowledged, and then looked to for causation, evaluated for repair or replacement, and the process of authentication of doing that, and then the subsequent initiation and the results of it being picked back up, that dip that gets created from that time sequence process. We did a show about that, and I think we covered it very well as to what that means if you're not looking at things until they're broken. I want to talk in relationship to the topic of the show today more about the predictive analytics side of that. Now, I will be first to say that there's many times I'm on the bleeding edge of something I like to be knowledgeable about, sometimes ahead of where it's actually useful. I try to go down those rabbit holes where it's like, well, that was not built for this, but maybe it could be used for that. I'm notorious for that. If you talk to any of my friends and people that work with me, that I'm constantly like, yes, but I'd like to think of it as the good side of what Steve Jobs done, that if you could take away all the reasons why it can't be done, what would you like it to do? And can we build what we need to get it done? I envision that in lots of things that we do. And one of them is predictive analytics. I'm always thinking, well, why can't we just do this? Well, because some of the functions, as I quickly find out as I begin to try to tear it apart, aren't developed to a point or aren't connected in a way that allow you to do that. And so you have to kind of slow down and wait for all of the inertia that the industry in this space is doing to catch up with its value of doing it. As we always say, not that something needs to get done, it's when it finally can be made where somebody can benefit from the need of getting it done. Capitalism in that sense. So here we are with the industry. We know CES is happening in Las Vegas, and all these innovations of all these new tech gadgets for consumers, but you're seeing a lot of AI things. And of course, I try to embrace AI. And as I learn AI more and more for what we wanted to do in hospitality marketing, I realize the limitations of it. I'm always mildly smiling when I talk to people and they say, oh yeah, we use AI. And it turns out to being maybe rewriting a blog post or writing ad content or writing page content or writing better emails, making interesting images. But it's like skipping a stone on the water. It's not really the depth of what you can do with it. And then you get others that are looking at how the usage of AI as a catchphrase, where it's not even applicable. We've infused AI into our toilet paper roll dispenser. Okay, I make it funny, but it's or try to make it funny, but it's true. People are just literally labeling the two initials on just about anything that was already doing what it's doing, but now it's AI. So we have this spectrum of usability, desirability, and aspirational. That's all over the board. And what I've come to find is this idea of using predictive analytics is a great idea. And some companies are doing better with it than others by far, or more useful ways of doing it. Others are just making it pie in the sky terminology. I get a kick out of companies that talk about data lakes and data warehouses, and we're going to accumulate this data without the repercussions of consent value, authentication, and usability. Like, why are you building a data lake? What are you going to use it for? Well, when we build it, we'll know what it is for. Okay, well, there you go. A lot of times the novelty or the excitement of it, the buzz of it, the shiny new penny of it is more valuable than the actual creation of it. It goes back to like with apps where people's like, oh, I got to have an app. Well, what do you want the app to do? I don't know. Pretty much just what our website does. So why an app? What makes it different? And you try to justify the value proposition of an app and its functionality being in native onto a phone compared to a web-based app, which is really an interface that makes your website act like an app when used on the mobile platforms. And the people that are selling the apps justify why they're price tagging it and the value proposition of it. And the people that are looking for the value of what it presents itself as tend to lean more towards the browser configuration of an app version of it. Any which way, the buzz of apps, simply to have one, it reminds me way back in the late 90s. I was running a Hilton, and back then there was no such thing as e-commerce or digital anything. But it was, everybody had to have a website. This was before Google was Google, and when Yahoo, there was Prodigy and what have you, and different browsers and everything. And you went to a bookstore to buy a book that had web addresses in it for products. It was like a phone book back in the day when the phone books meant something. I know I digress in time frames, but the idea was that you had to have a website to be in there. So we made a website. The functionality was, anyways, but everybody had to have a website. What do you want to work with? I don't know. What does it do? A lot of the websites didn't even have any actionable things. It was like it was like a brochure. Like, hey, we're online. If you go on your computer and type this in, you'll go to our website and you'll see whatever we put up there, as bad as it was, about us. Couldn't do anything with it at the time initially, but it was there because you had to have one. I feel a lot of times our technologies, and AI being that current buzz of it, are about having to have something with it. Doesn't matter that it's valuable or useful or problem solving. It's just we should have it so that we don't look like we're behind the other people that we're competing with that say they have it. It's keeping up with the Joneses. Predictive analytics, I believe, has fallen into this category. People love to say that they have AI-driven data. You ask them what that means, there is no answer. And even if they think they have an answer, like, well, we have systems that we can go in that will tell us about our information. What are you asking it? And how are you asking it? How are you interfacing with it? And what it ends up boiling down to is if you keep pressing to the point of irritation to them, they'll eventually show you that it's really just machine learning. It's like a formula. It's like an Excel chart. It's really literally you've created conditional formulas, and by putting in certain data points, it has certain resultant points. I'm not bashing it. That's a lot of functionality there. A lot of value to that if you build them correctly for what you're asking it to do, for what you're wanting to use it for. But it's not AI. That's formula, algorithmic, machine learning programming. And that's part where I've had to step back on my ambitions. It's not that I'm still not pushing what I want to try to do, but my modality of thinking of how to get it done, that it's as simple as figuring out the perfect prompt, doesn't work that world. That world was passed months ago, a year ago. It's not about a single answer creates the final solution. It's a series of progressive inquiries that produce the data that you need in such a format that you can do something with it, which means, and this goes back to my very old statement I say over and over, you need to know what you want to do with it, the goal of it, before you ask the question of how to make it. It's imperative that you understand the ending before you begin the beginning. How do you want this to be? Now, my envisionment, I try to raise the bar up and think aspirationally about all the cool things you could do, kind of like a HAL 2000 out of 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Star Trek Computer, where you can have an active conversation and progressively, granularly get to a point of action item. That's not there yet. And I'm not saying that it isn't possible in certain forms, but not in ours at this point, and no one is near that if they try to sell it. What we are at is the ability to take those algorithmic mathematical ways of determining value numbers and adding a lot more data to them and making those numbers more active about how the other data sets are comparative to it. And there, AI has a very strong value proposition. Let me give you an example of that. Through a variety of tools that we talk about on our podcast all the time, when it's called All Prompts, which is just this really great interface that helps create prompt sequences specific to marketing or lots of industries and revenue management included, that creates all these prompt sequences that you can use to better define data usage. It has its limitations. I literally do it as a template starter and then take that and then expand on what I consider data access. Now, we've all had Excel for years and years and years, and it's a great program. And when it comes to mathematical stuff, I usually pump it through Excel first because it's my familiar space. It's my happy place. But Google Sheets rivals that. But the real value of Google Sheets is the ability to handle massive amounts of data on the cloud that is accessible. Unlike Excel, which it's trying to catch up, it does have data cloud storage capabilities and connectivity. It's not like it's not trying to do the same thing. But with data sheets, Google Sheets, I can make data sets of things through API calls. And we've talked about APIs on the show before. So for those unfamiliar with it, it's a way of communicating specific sets of data from a software that is not connected to yours, where it allows a gateway that says, okay, I will allow this data to be taken from this choice of data that I have available in a medium that you can now transfer to another source. Okay, that's API stuff, API calls. And so now you have the ability to pull weather, traffic, gas prices, hotel prices, competitive prices, review rates, all of these other things that you would look at from one screen to the next, or pause and do some research and see, just to answer a question of, oh, how's my competitor doing with this or what have you. Social media posts, time of posts, types of posts, engagement of posts. All of this data is gatherable. It's not that there's other platforms that can't present some semblance of interpretation of this data. That's not the point. I have tons of software that will tell me social media influencers by topic and category or competitor or market. I can look at any of my competitors and see it. We've talked about these tools for years now, about what my competitor is spending, what are their ad campaigns, and how successful they are relative to the performance of mine. How am I placed against them in comp set? There's lots of resources that do this, but you're looking at this screen, then that screen, then this screen, and then you're trying to make some semblance of aggregation to make a deterministic question answered. This ability now of better AI comes in small steps. Take the data, connect it, and put it into a data set that is yours. I want to know the weather for dates of this location. I want to know the flight costs of the airport that services it and the amount of carriers that come to it. And I want to know the traffic densities on the roads that feed it by the time of year and maybe by the time of day. I usually just go because it's a massive amount of sets, but usually time of year, in the sense of calendar month, and sometimes, depending upon seasonality of demand, by the week, because I'm looking for trend of influence. But anyways, not going off tangent. And these can all be data sets, and they're sitting on their own, and they're useful, but they're just charts. Date, data, date, data. Okay. Then you have all of these, and then now you take the tools that are available out now and say, hey, look, I have my GA4, and I'm looking at my data of what my website is doing and where the traffic's coming from and what are they doing with me. And I have all this wonderful ability to cut and parse any sets of data that I want to find relevant. People's actions, which is the key element to creating good targeting, on and on. We've had these, I keep referring to old shows, but our shows cover these things. And I want to compare this information to my data that I'm pulling in different folders now, okay? And you create what's called common key marks, which are dates. Dates are pretty much the functional gold standard of correlation between data sets, because you're going to want to know what your traffic is on a date, your gas prices are on a date, your airlift is on a date, your weather is on a date, your website's traffic on a date, not just for conversions, but for predication of engagement, social media engagement by date. Date is the gold standard of that. And so you create with the tools we have now, and they're getting better by the day, these agents. What people are beginning to realize that an omni Google channel AI is cute, but not as helpful as AI that is functionally tailored to specific functions or specific tasks or specific categories. Those agents, and having those agents of AI correlate the data cohesively, that they're all looking for a common KPI, a common thread, date. Let's just pick date to be the most consistent. And you make these agents do these specific things that are now available for use. So I have these data sets, and I have the correlation of date to be with them. So now I create an inquiry related to about dates from these data sources. At first, it was for me just deciding and figuring out, can I do that? Like, I don't know what's going to tell me, but if I say, look at this sequence of dates this week in a certain month and tell me, you have to be specific, what the weather was like, what the traffic was like, what the gas prices were like, how many planes were flying in, how much social media was searching for it, how much was search queries using for it, how much was my website traffic using for it. Tell me from these data sources about this date range, what was going on. At first, I'm sitting there going, wow, that is not really useful. It's all over the place. I mean, okay, it was sunny, it was rainy, okay, but what were the effects? But what it did do is, rather than trying to race ahead as like, why can't I make the perfect prompt that tells me the answer to the universe, is instead, how can I progressively take the results from what this came up with and ask a following question that refines that to a more specific purpose? May not be the final purpose, but a better understanding of it. Because now you've aggregated this date stuff together by date. Now you want to aggregate it by interest. Like, okay, I see all this stuff. Is there any correlations between all of these data sets and my traffic on the website, just in general? And you sometimes have to refine that question, but it comes back with some semblance of an answer. Useful or not useful. Either you use it in the next query, like from the results of this is my next question, or is it, okay, knowing what it shows me, let me go back and change the question to being something better. And then from that, maybe I can use it more specifically. This process, okay, is at the bottom level of when we're talking about predictive analytics. It really truly is. This is the crawl, walk, run combination. Okay, this is the crawl part. This is trying to. We talked about big data. Remember when that was a buzzword? Everybody, big data this, big data that. We have all this big data, but nobody, of course, was using it functionally or even knew what to use it for in lots of ways. They just wanted touted that they throw the word into a phrase that they were talking about. AI is like that again today, right? So now we have the entrance point of trying to at least have a contrast of our data based on a key metric of dates. Now we're going to go into what is it we want to maybe understand about this better, and that intuitiveness of, well, okay, what does this mean? Was there a positive or negative impact? Was there a relationship between gas prices and the drive traffic? And you'd be surprised, a lot of times not. We keep assuming because we see the news the way we see it, we see our own self perspectives the way we see how we react to things, that there's this cause and effect relationship associated with the data, that if gas prices go up, traffic goes down. No. And that's true when it comes to the fact that the demand is such that the traffic is relative to the demand that exists. The gas prices, unfortunately, are a simple resultant of economics. And however negative the impact of what it should be for driving, it didn't diminish the traffic densities. It could, however, influence, and this is the thing that you expand the question on, future drive market interest if the prices were to be at that level again, because a lot of the traffic demand at the time window I was looking at was based on prices that didn't exist beforehand. Now, all being said, even when the prices went down, I didn't see a direct correlation of traffic going up, because if you go back into the time sequence, the decisions of modality of transportation were already made. The price fluctuation was either a boon or a bust for the people that had to get stuck with the price change. But their decision to travel that mode of transportation didn't. However, extend the timeline out and have these events happening when they're in the decision-making process, and it could have an influence on whether prices in airlines being higher or lower versus the potential of gas prices being higher or lower are weighed by the user to determine which option may be the better to consider when they're making the choice of their transportation choice. See? So same data, different date range makes a difference. All of this is the like, why do I care? Well, because you want to know. You want to be that person that understands when they're looking at what's happening. They know not only why, most likely, it's happening, but what they should do about it if they want to modify it. That predictive analytics value of doing that is having enough data and enough components that are relatable to understand what it is that are the moving influencers to what you're looking at for business, our marketing. How effective is our ads? If we're targeting drive market ads and we're doing it at a time when prices are going up in gas, which is having a negative impact on the influence of drivers deciding to go as far as they could to come to us and maybe either drop us in consideration and take a flying option that goes elsewhere, or whether or not it's tolerable because we also have indications that cost of living is going down, or that the weather is predicted as good for the duration between all the feeder markets that we're marketing to. We can correlate that to our advertising success or even budgets to spend on advertising success. That is the predictive value of that. I've talked many times about the prescriptive aspect of data, which is not only telling you what's going on and how it's being influenced, but also what to do about it. That's a prescriptive model. That's past the line of capabilities at this point. You can make very simplistic prescriptive solutions, which is obvious. Like I did one just to see if I could create the correlation string of reducing rate, that when demand exceeds a certain percentage, then you can increase rate if there's inventory X still available. Just by the same inversion, you can decrease rate when demand is below a threshold and regardless of the inventory you have available. I mean, it's Captain Obvious because that's how we do rates. Lots of rooms to sell, not much demand, lower the rate. Not many rooms to sell, high demand, raise the rate. Simple correlations, but making the math work in a way of a prompt took a little finessing, because we take in a lot of assumption knowledge when we ask these questions of ourselves. The machine learning, the AI functionality of how you convey that in a way that it gives you the answer that is predictably accurate is a lot harder. You have to be very specific in how you identify the value relationships between the functions you're identifying and the causation of them and to the resultant of them. Again, maybe a little digression on a tangent, but the value of what that means is how you approach all of this. Is the understanding that for you to get to the answer that you want, you have to make sure you understand the question that's going to give you the best answer. More specifically, the answer you want. So in predictive analytics, what you're looking for is not the prescriptive solution, but rather the solution of interpretation. You're looking at the predictive aspect, which is the predication to prescriptive. You're looking at, with what we're looking at, this is most likely what is going to happen. It's not 100%. That's called confidence factors. What is the percentage confidence that what I'm looking at as data and influence and combinations and so forth is most likely to happen? Anything over 70, 75% begins to get into the realm of most probable. 85% and above is most likely. And of course, you get 95, you're looking at as close to a certainty as you can get. With that, it's only as good as the data you have. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. When it comes to computers, same too with data. If you're not inclusive of enough influencing factors associated with this, let's take, for instance, the tragedy that is happening in Southern California right now. There is no model that would have been built under what I just discussed that included tragedy at this scale or tragedy of any kind like this. Tragedies and the dynamics of them are not in the current way of understanding predictive modeling. They're into the programming of prevention and into the crash kits that we all have and the conditionals that we talk about. That, I talk about the stress testing of budgets back. That's a financial thing. What happens if, and what would we do if that happened, to at least to the degree of understanding that there's a path that we should pursue should this happen. Reduction in ad campaign capabilities, reduction in inventory or to market demand. These things have to be thought through as to what would we do about that. Not to the nth degree of every if-then conditional statement you'd come up with, but enough of them that you feel that you would have a clear direction based on just the direction being founded. And then, of course, the unique circumstances that created it would then temper what your next steps would be, but at least a direction and purpose. That's stress testing what you do. This predictive modeling would never have that conditional statement in it. Predictive modeling is about basing it on historical and current data sets of trend and impact and correlations. The volatility of uncertainties and tragedies and disasters are counterproductive to the predictive analytic model. You have to have the human instinct of knowing what to do if your hotel is in the line of a fire. You have the humanistic aspect of what you are is the impact of a hotel that's on the periphery of that in a supporting role of the demand that you're about to get and what you should do about it from an operational perspective as well as a marketing perspective. How do you get your message out that you have the resources that people are in desperate need of to be able to take advantage of what you're offering? Predictive analytics is all about taking patterns and taking the data. And we have a unique time in history, and it's only going to get more as time goes forward, of gathering large swaths of data. Yes, the old analogy of big data is true. Large swaths of data and using them in a way that we mentally as humans couldn't do on our own, but computers can do in creating relationships. Now, prior to AI and AI agents and so forth, you had to be really good at making math models. And math models really go to taking numbers and using the numbers against other numbers and figuring out the sources and the values of the numbers and so forth. It's not that the agents don't do that, but they do it at a blindingly fast speed. But they do it under the auspices of how you define why you're asking. That's the magic of the AI component that so many people take credit for. It's not that I can't make a great conditional if-then component with an average weighted mean value and a predictive model percentage threshold that would hit a criteria that would then be used as a function trigger for another formula. You can do that. Everybody has done that. It's more about taking the data, doing all that, and then knowing that the ultimate goal is what should I do about it, or what does that mean for it, for the purpose of what I've designated the AI agent to identify as marketing variations, ad variations, targeting variations. That's when the connect the dots works so well. So in our world, none of that's really happening. We're still in the world, and dominantly in the world, of, our paid campaigns are beginning to not look so good. They're not producing as much. Well, we'll give it another week. Why a week? I don't know, because it figures into everybody's personal schedule that everybody takes the weekend off, or if they don't take the weekend off, or Fridays are just not a good day, or whatever. We'll give it 7 days. We'll get back together on Monday next week and see what's going on. Monday next week, they're not looking any better. As a matter of fact, they're looking worse. Well, let's start looking at what's going on. Okay, so chalk 1 week of nothing, just degraded performance. Next week, well, we're finding out that the ad campaigns are running flat because the promotions are not concurrent with the promotional timeframes. Our inventory for those are already booked up, or there's no rooms available for that offer anymore. That offer went defunct, or the link was broke, or whatever it was. The discovery happened. Great. Whoa, shit, we got to get that fixed. Let's fix it if we need to fix it, or adjust it for needs to be adjustment. No, we need to replace it. It's just all stale. That's early season campaigns. We need to be in our mid-season campaigns. They're running, but they're competing with the old ones. So we need the old ones off. Why didn't we do it? Slap somebody's hand for it, whatever. And then they do this is what we need to do about it. That probably happened in the sequence of a few days because you had to talk to someone that may not have been in the same building, the property that you may not be located at, or the management office that's not nearby, or the person that was just doing the conversation needed authentication to say, let's do this or spend this or whatever. And then more days go by. And then the new launch, once approved, which sometimes can be arduous, like, well, let's review what we're going to be launching here. Let's get everybody's buy-in, because nobody wants to be blamed individually. We'd all get to wave a finger at each other if we all made the wrong choice. The politics of decision. And finally gets launched. Then it has to get seeded and, of course, authenticated, which costs higher at the beginning and lower towards as it gets better. And all that happens in a cycle that creates this low curved arc for just that production. And not having something to supplement it, or not even creating it by being proactive, predictive, that this was going to happen. Having the data to say, guys, our campaigns related to snowbound activity for our ski adventures is going to fall flat this next week, because we know by trend demand, all the bookings that were for next week have already been made and done. So us talking about our snow offers next week, we have no 1 to 2 day pickup. There is no window we're paying money for. There's nothing here. We're just feeling good that we have an ad running that talks about winter in the middle of winter, when everybody that's staying with us this week has already booked with us. And there's nobody we can take that hasn't booked yet that's going to be here from any of the markets we're advertising. They're not in drive distance. They're not local interest. There's no reason we're spending the same money on a local drive market campaign for a 1 to 2 day pickup that doesn't exist. Let's kick in the next one, which is pre-spring break transitional timeframes, offers and opportunities that are in the booking window of interest. Because if we look at our data, we're seeing people are looking 38 to 44 days out. Not now. It's not that nobody is, but do you want to spend $1,000 for that one person that walks in the door and makes you $400 or $500 for the business you have? Not a good ROI. So you need to always be aware of the progression of your campaigns to know when the transition needs to occur to the next phase of what you're doing, so that instead of having this dip of discovery of issue, repair of issue, relaunch of solution, continuance on, and that dip gets created from that process. Instead, we're hitting this. It looks like we're at that point now where we need to transition. We keep on transitioning, and it keeps on. Even if it's flat, it's better than this. Even if it just maintains from the transition of it, even if it does a little warble, it's still better than this. And what you really would hope is that from the transition, you're getting an early launch on the early engagements that give you the better opportunity for capturing the people, because you are proactively doing something your competitors weren't. That's what predictive analytics value is for. So I think that my pontificating about it is I've covered the basis of what I wanted to cover. Again, I do want to bring to attention tragedies. We know they happen around the world. It's not as if they don't. We think about the flooding that happened in Europe. We think about fires that happened in Greece, the cyclones that happened in the Pacific. The earthquake that happened in Tibet, which got bumped off the news completely, and hundreds of people have died there. Of course, every country is focused on itself as to what it sees as the issue. The United States is at the top of the pile of that, and of course, for good reason in this case, Southern California is just a massive tragedy unfolding in front of our eyes live. And the weather and everything else that goes along with these times of years. So keep an open heart, keep the heart of the servant from a hospitality perspective. Be there to be as helpful as you can, to look for the benefit of making another person's life better, in no matter what capacity we can. For all those that are, everyone, but obviously in the industry that we are most adhered to, everybody that is affected from those in the hospitality industry, the restaurants, the hotels, spas, golf, all the things that are a part of what we give as a happiness to people in the world. All the people that are involved with that in Southern California are as deeply affected as all of their neighbors are. So best of anything that can be helpful to them in whatever way. For everyone watching us around the world, thank you for the patience as I centric into the U.S. a little bit on that. To all the 209 countries that our TV station goes out to, the Hospitality Channel. Thank you as always for watching us live on it. You can also catch us at hospitalitychannel.tv for all the reruns of our shows and our Predictive podcasts. Our hospitality radio station is in 39 countries. We have progressive programming, a variety of hosts and content on it. You can catch a replay of our live show every Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. For our APAC friends, it's 11:30 a.m. Sydney time, Australia. So APAC gets a better time zone for it. And 11:30 a.m. Wednesday for London EU time, in London time for the EU and Mideast friends that follow us so loyally on so many channels. As always, you're catching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you're catching us on Twitch, whatever. And then, of course, we do an audio podcast where we get a little more granular in tools. We're going to bring up an old faithful friend on our tools today called Giru, which helps with predictive modeling to a degree. At least it puts numbers to things as to if we did this, what would come out of it. So if you love our audio podcast, please catch our podcast 492 coming up later today. That'll be out this evening. Anyways, thank you all for the privilege of your time. My name is Lauren Gray. Best wishes for everyone that is facing tough circumstances in South California and, of course, even in the Midwest, and still those that are dealing with the tragedies of hurricanes in Western Carolina and here in Florida. I mean, it's not like it went away and it didn't all get fixed after the cameras got turned off. So there's lots of places that still need the heart of the hospitality servant. And how can we make our fellow humans happier and comfortable? So with all of that, thank you again, and look forward to talking to you all next week.